Welcome to the Medovia Menopause Podcast, your trusted source for information about menopause and midlife. Join us each episode as we have great conversations with great people. Tune in and enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Medovia Podcast. It's Kim, just Kim today. April's not well, so we wish her the best. So menopause is still something we whisper about, as you know, and for women whose journey includes cancer or surgical menopause, that silence can be even heavier. The decisions are more complex, the road is less clear, and the isolation is very real. So today, we're talking about what it means to stop whispering and start using the words bravely. I'm joined by my friend, Kristin Swanson. She's a mindset and executive coach who helps female founders move through fear, resistance, and self-doubt and take meaningful action. Kristin is also a breast cancer survivor and navigated surgical menopause, and her lived experience deeply shapes the way she supports others. We had coffee a couple months ago and we talked about having her on. So in this episode, we're going to explore trusting yourself as the ultimate decision maker, which probably ties to all aspects of your life, the power of speaking up, and the tools that help you stay the course when the path ahead feels unclear. Audience, I'm really glad to have you here for this one. And Kristin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. I love when I talk about, anyone that knows me knows I love to talk about things and then actually do them. And you and I talked about having you on, and now you're here, and I can't be more thrilled. So thank you for taking the time.
Yes, of course.
So can you share a bit about your personal journey with your surgical breast cancer and menopause and how that experience shaped the work that you do today?
Yes. Okay. So 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I think and I had a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old at home.
Nice.
So I think the hardest part for me was really the surgery decision that I was left to make. And I felt like I was left to make it alone. I really wanted the doctors to recommend what the next step would be. I thought that's how it went down. And that wasn't my experience, at least. I was given all the information, all the data, all the percentage chance reoccurrence, and the choice to do a lumpectomy, a mastectomy, or a double mastectomy. And that was very, very hard. And I felt like, I'm sure it was probably days, but it feels like weeks for me to sit with that decision. It's kind of a blur. But what helped me was to get quiet with my journal after looking through all the data and talking to all the people and all of the opinions. And then I asked myself in my journal one morning, I just had this question come to me. What do you want your legacy with this cancer to be? And I just felt this sink in knowing, and my pen just wrote, I want my kids to remember that I had cancer, and that's all I want them to remember. I didn't want them to remember me always rushing back to get another scan and another biopsy. And I had been through a lot of that already. And I didn't want them to remember all of that fear, all of that, the poking and prodding. And so my grandmother had died of breast cancer, and my mom died in her 50s as well, but of a rare form of dementia. But before that, she was very worried that she was going to get breast cancer. So I think part of that is part of my story. I wanted to kind of break that fear worry cycle. And I just was completely clear. I am going to do a double mastectomy. And so then I ran in, told my husband, called my sister, I finally have my decision, and they all were, that's a big decision. Are you sure you want to do that? But I had this knowing. And so it was the first time where I really felt that knowing. And then after the pathology, after the surgery and the pathology, the surgeon told me, wow, you really know your body so well. Because if we would have done a lumpectomy, we would be going back for a mastectomy. And if we would have done a mastectomy, we'd be going back for a double mastectomy because it was bigger than they thought. It was a different stage than they thought, all the things than they could see. So there was that. And then I was on tamoxifen for 5 years. And so they found an ovarian, what they thought was an ovarian cyst. And so I had a hysterectomy back in 2020. When it was just me in the hospital and everything shut down. And I remember Googling at the time when I was in that hospital room alone, recovering from the hysterectomy. And I did keep one ovary, which I was happy about for 4 years. So I'll tell the rest of that story. But so at that point, I did go into menopause, but not like full blown menopause until the 4 years later. So it turns out that it wasn't ovarian cyst, it was an endometriosis. And I just remember Googling about like tamoxifen and endometriosis, and just I felt like there was something there. I wasn't sure. And so then anyway, 4 years later, still had the one ovary. So glad I did that, because for those 4 years, I didn't have quite the level of symptoms that I have now. So I'm happy about that. But then I went into the ER because I thought I had appendicitis with just pain. And it turns out they told me I had a complex mass on my other ovary and I had to have that removed. So that's, so much fear comes along with that too, as a cancer survivor, as you wait to get on the list for surgery and all of the things. But again, it was endometriosis. So, and then last week, and I did ask both of the surgeons and my oncologist, is there any tie? And I still don't know, like 100% sure. But last week I saw data about a tie between endometriosis and tamoxifen. And I am not saying don't take tamoxifen. I absolutely think, what, and you and your doctors figure that out. But there was something in me that knew I was supposed to take tamoxifen for 10 years, and I decided to take it for 5. And that piece of data that I just saw last week, it felt again like validation. So what I'm saying is, and this is the same thing that I do a lot in my work with female founders, is there's all the opinions, all the experts, and all the logical information that is given to you. And take it all in and get mentors and resources and support and take it all in, absolutely. And then get quiet and listen to what your intuition says, because I really do believe that there's so much power in your intuition. And those two stories just kind of, at least for me, brought me what I almost felt like was evidence. Oh, I can listen to that gut feeling. And then since then, I mean, I just see it on the daily in terms of like the clients that I work with and myself. When you listen to that intuition and follow it, it really usually leads you in the right place.
What a story. And there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
The what do you want, and then listening to your knowing, is not always something we do. And audience, before we came on for recording, Kristin and I were talking about giving more time for silence in asking questions. Walk us through kind of how you learned to trust that knowing, because it's really, really hard to really trust the knowing, and usually it's almost always it's right.
Yes. I mean, I learned through so much trial and error and a lot of life hardship, I think, is also how I learned. But I think the one thing that I would say, because I think that usually makes sense to people, is the knowing is often a whisper. So it's not loud. Your ego and your fear is loud and often almost like tries to stop us. But that knowing, it's kind of like a softer voice. And since it is a whisper, and I believe everyone has it, I think everyone has intuition, but a lot of people can't hear it because there's so much going on, so much noise, never stopping, going. And so that's part of the practice for me, is to put more spaciousness in my life and my days to be able to hear that. And that looks different for everyone. That has to be your own journey, but that's sort of, and I think it's just connecting inward, asking, and then like continuing to take the steps and then check back in, knowing that you can always change courses. I mean, with all of this stuff, this medical stuff, it's not black and white. It's changing daily. And so really kind of looking at just that next step, and usually, a small next step that you could take if you really like ask yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The whispering and making it louder. Talk more about that. Why does this language matter here for this conversation of listening and then amplifying that message?
Well, I think the language matters because of energy. I think when you speak something out loud, like about your menopause journey, for instance, it's almost like you take your power back. There's something energetically that shifts,
Mm-hmm.
and you are now in the energy of, I'm going to get the answers and I'm going to keep looking. And even if somebody tells me no, I'm going to ask somebody else and I'm going to ask for other referrals. And that is a little bit more of like a can do, we're going to figure this out energy. Whereas if I'm just quiet and I just have this happen to me and I just am stuck with these symptoms, and it's almost feels like a little bit more of a suffering in silence,
Yeah.
and it's uncomfortable to talk about this topic. And because I mean, for me, it feels unnatural. It feels like it wasn't what I was taught to do. It feels like I'm kind of going against the grain to speak these words out loud. And I think that's why it's important, because you're energetically claiming that you're going to move through this and find some answers.
Yeah. I want to get back to that, but going back to your most recent surgery where you went like into menopause right away, I often hear that doctors don't warn you about what's going to happen. They warn you what's going to happen after your surgery, but they don't talk to you about how menopause is going to hit. What was your experience and how did you prepare for that?
Oh, no, yeah, no warning, no nothing, no words spoken about it whatsoever. Just, it'll be this amount of recovery time, then you'll be back to work this many days. This is your lifting restriction. You're not gonna be able to drive because of the pain meds. I mean, it's definitely no talk of menopause. And with my second one, when I went back in, I was already having some symptoms and asked the OBGYN about those. And I mean, his answer was, I'm pretty sure it was something to the effect of, yeah, it's tough. And I want to say it was stiff upper lip, but it wasn't something like that. It was something to that effect, though. And I wasn't even sure it was a phrase that I wasn't familiar with. And I think I Googled it, and it was kind of like, just,
Suffer, suck it up.
yeah, suck it up was kind of
Yeah.
the energy behind it. Yeah.
And what did you do?
Well, I mean, at that time, I was really focused on just the recovery, right? So, I mean, and then I started talking to people in these circles that I know, and started to find a functional medicine doctor and ask. And I definitely had to go back and forth between functional medicine doctor, oncologist. Is it okay if I do this? And so that's a whole nother conversation probably. But I just kept asking and started to kind of like form a team around me. And that's where it started to get difficult. And that's what we were talking about over coffee. It's like, it's so inspiring to me, all that's coming to light on in the menopause space right now.
Yeah.
I am so glad.
Yeah.
And it still, as a breast cancer survivor, feels a little bit lonely, because some of those answers, at least for us, is still aren't there.
Yeah. So being unspoken, and I think you said that menopause and cancer kind of both stay unspoken. And you reached out to a community of specialists and doctors and people who've gone through that. What was your experience in finding that support? And what advice would you give to people who are sort of in that similar position, trying to figure out, what to do? Because you talked about your doctors were like, well, what do you want to do? And you're like, yeah, but you're the doctor. You're supposed to tell me what I want to do. What advice would you give to somebody who is in that position, trying to figure out what to do and when and how to seek community to help them?
Yeah, I think seek community to help you when you feel stuck, when you feel like you're not getting the answers, when you don't feel supported, when you don't feel the connection too. I definitely I had to fire an oncologist and like go hire another one that was in a better, which is so uncomfortable when you are making these decisions. You don't want to, there's something that feels almost like questioning authority to me in
Right.
all of these conversations, where especially as women, I think we're pleasers and I think we don't want to ruffle feathers. And so it feels a little bit like pushback if you're questioning something or asking for the data or bringing something that you found that you want them to explain to you in terms that you can understand, which is not easy.
Right.
And so I think it's until you feel comfortable, I want to say, where you feel, I think until you feel supported, and just keep asking and don't underestimate where you might get this information. So for me, with my cancer journey, it was like the preschool director who I just happened to be telling because I think my friends were going to be picking up my daughter from preschool. So I was telling her, I'm going to be giving you all these names because these people are going to be bringing my daughter home. And it turns out she is a breast cancer survivor. And she's the first one that said to me, I'm a survivor too. And there was so much power in those words. I felt like, how can she call me that? Am I a survivor? Like what? There was things that I just never would have asked for support in that way. And she showed up in a way that I never would have known, right? And saying those words to me, and then bringing in other people that she introduced me to people. There was doctors, there was people that could help with my kids. You just never know how people are going to support you. And then with the menopause journey, like the functional medicine doctor came from another football mom. So you think maybe you're not talking about that at the football game, but it turns out I love my functional medicine doctor. And so it doesn't always have to be that you go to like the support groups and the hospital website and all of those things. I mean, absolutely you can do that too. And just you never know. People kind of come out of the woodwork when you start to talk about these things.
That's huge, actually. And we're taught to not talk about some of those things. And it sounds like you're like, look, I just need you to know that I'm going to need support during this time. And so doing, you found people to help you. And then had you not said anything, it would have been harder for you to get through it, because who's going to pick up your kids and all those kinds of things. But you got experience from other people by just sharing what you had gone through. And I see that in the menopause space all the time, that people who were like, oh, me too. What? Okay. Yeah. Tell me more about that. And there's data. And I'm sure if you've listened to our podcast before, audience, you've heard me say this a million times. There's data that says the more that you talk about it, the easier the symptoms are to manage. It's just getting it out to be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like you were brave.
Yeah. And I sort of feel like this, and a lot of cancer survivors do, it feels like it was my only choice, right? And yeah, it's important. And then I think the other thing when you say like that, I see these two journeys as being similar, the menopause and the cancer, is something that I learned from the social worker at the hospital during my breast cancer journey. She helped me tell my kids, because I think that the other similarity is changing the narrative of these things. So she helped me tell my 3 and 6-year-old, meaning like kind of coached me through the conversation. What are you going to say? Because I was really scared to tell my son, who was 6, who's 16 now. But when he was 6, I was afraid to have this conversation with him. I thought he was going to ask me if I was going to die. So that was my big fear. How am I going to answer that? So she really helped me. But one of the things she said really stuck with me and has become so true, and I'll never forget it, is use the word. She said, we aren't used to that. And in a lot of households, it's whispered about. And if you go home and all of these people are whispering as they come in and support you, your kids are going to make something up. And it's probably going to be worse than the reality. And the fact is, these kids are going to see people live through cancer. And she was right. My kids have now seen 4 close family members live through cancer. And when we used to hear the word, or when I heard the word, I think fear of death. I mean, that's what, but they won't. And so I also think it's the same thing with menopause. My daughter hears me talk about it. She's going to end up talking about, they're going to have answers. This is not going to feel like it does for us, for them. So I see those as also being like parallel.
The reason why we do this work, April and I, it's because of our daughters.
Yeah.
But on that note, I think you're seeing the generations changing the narrative about the way we talk about those things because of what, the advice that you were given. And that is probably true of so many things, right?
Mhm.
Just talk about it and make it a normal conversation. So how does that show up in the work that you do when you're coaching female founders? How does this trusting your knowing, telling the truth, using your words, advocating for yourself, how does that show up in your coaching?
Well, in my coaching, the similarity is really around moving through the discomfort and the fear while you speak it into existence, is what I will call it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of that energetic thing that I was talking about, where I can too find the answers. You're stepping into it from I can too do this, even though my inner critic is telling me, who am I to do this? Who am I to talk about this on social media? I don't have a different story than every other influencer out there, or whatever those like inner critic stories are. So the similarities are taking those small actions, the ones that, yes, you're afraid to take. And if you're afraid to take them, I believe you're definitely headed in the right direction. Those are the steps to take. And the other thing that I help my clients with is removing the overwhelm, which I can see that so much in this menopause thing, right? Like
Right.
the creatine and the vitamin D and the protein and the fiber, and we all know the list of things that we're supposed to be doing.
Yes.
And I mean, I can't do all of that tomorrow. I will not do any of it if I try to do all of it tomorrow. But if I just start with the one that is most important to me right now, which is sleep, then I will start with the magnesium, and
Yes.
right. And I got the medical grade CBD from my functional medicine doctor. Like things that I will just the smallest step that is it, and then get consistent with that. And then you can layer on the rest of the things. So that's kind of the similarity. And then the other similarity is doing it with the fear present. And so the way that I help my clients with that is a lot of mindset coaching. So helping them notice that that is a story, and, kind of questioning it in your mind. Is that true? Even writing it down, what is your mind telling you when you sit down to hit publish on that social media post, right? Like
Yeah.
write it out and see the words on the paper, which is the same thing as saying it out loud. Say it out loud to a like-minded, trusted friend, and you just see the look on their face, like, oh, you're telling yourself that, and then it just instantly starts to dissipate. It's
Yeah.
the same thing when you write it down. You read it back to yourself and think, oh, yeah, that's not really true. So it's moving through the discomfort, taking the small actions, and just continuing to show up.
Yeah. And did it take you going through all the things that you did to sort of find that comfort with talking back to your inner critic?
Oh, that's such a good question. Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the reason, and I guess why I'm motivated to help women before they kind of have life's ultimatums like I did,
Yeah.
is it's like getting in touch with your why and why it's important. So for me, it was like to live a long, healthy life and be present with my children, and with the work, it's to help make room for souls to lead, so that we are working on the things that we want to be working on, right? And so if you're scared and if you're full of inner critic thoughts, you have to kind of like look through that lens to be able to move through it. And so obviously with a cancer journey, that is like in your face, the fear of mortality. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it did. I think, at least for me, and I still believe that everybody can do it, but I think for me it did take something like that.
Which is, too bad, but that's the way it is in life, right? The hard things make you stronger. That's just the truth.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to a woman listening who feels stuck, overwhelmed by her inner critic, unsure about what the next step to take is, whether it's in menopause? Because I think you're saying if you're stuck in menopause, if you're stuck in what to do with your health, if you're stuck on like what to do with your work or your business, it's some of the same tools, right? What
Mm-hmm.
would you say to someone on what the sort of next steps they should take?
Well, I would probably start with, how do you want to feel?
Mm-hmm.
How do you want to feel? And if you don't know, because some people don't,
Most people don't.
you start with what you don't want. I mean, because we all know that. Well,
Yeah.
I don't want to feel like this. I don't want to feel tired. I don't want to feel the brain fog, or I don't want to feel stuck, and I don't want to feel trapped in this corporate job, or whatever it is. Start with what you don't want, because we all know what that is. I think everyone, if you asked them right now, they could tell you. It's just,
Right.
unfortunately, that's just easier to like get in touch with.
Yeah.
And then start with that, and then ask yourself, so what do you want? Which is often like the opposite of that, or some feeling that isn't stuck. Maybe it's freedom. Maybe it's, I want to feel alive, or I want to feel awake and aware, or just like really in touch with how you want to feel. And then it is all about the next small action that you could take that is reasonable. So within your, maybe it's just sending an email to another friend that you know that is going through this, or a potential mentor that you've seen do what you would like to do. And think of it that way, like it's one email, it's one Google search, it's one phone call, and all you need to know is that you're going to take that one step, and then trust that the next one will come, and it will, especially if you keep showing up and keep taking the actions.
So how can you build support systems that truly meet you where you are, where you're in this season? Because we talk to a lot of women who don't have the strong support system, and you need them. So, how do you help people sort of find that during all these troubled times?
Yes. Well, I think the biggest thing is to keep looking. It's so easy to get defeated and stop. So asking, and like continuing to ask, and like I said, asking people in different circles. And there, I mean, I was in a, I think it was called non-surgical menopause, or no, surgical menopause non-HRT Facebook group for a while. So there are groups that are just can get so specific to your issue. So groups, support groups, also online at the hospitals, people in your personal life, and just start with the talking about what you're going through, see what comes up, and follow some of those introductions or pieces of information. Someone will say, listen to this podcast. And so you don't know if that podcast is going to help you or not, but once you listen to it, then some other little piece of information comes. And so start to build that network. And I would start with the doctors and the providers that do resonate with you, that you do trust, and kind of like build from there.
It's interesting that you brought back up the doctors and the providers, because I'm still stuck on how strong you advocated for yourself when you were going through this. You fired a doctor and you listened to your knowing, and you said these are the things that you wanted to do. Were you always good at self-advocating, or is this something a skill set you've learned over time? And how can we share with others that they have permission to do that?
Yeah, I might have always been as good at self-advocating.
Yeah.
And so I think, and I definitely I'm like, I follow what doctors say to me. And then I also go talk to my functional medicine doc and my acupuncturist and, the naturopath and all of those things. So I think it helps to have the other inputs if you are going to push back. And I think you don't have to look at it as pushing back. I mean, I think of it as more like curiosity.
Yeah, sure.
So getting curious and asking the questions, and going to other types of providers, and then bringing that into the conversation, and then asking how that might, work together and all of that. So for the person that's not good at self-advocating, I think that's such a good question. What would they do? I think is get really honest with the people that are around them, and speak up even through your scared words. I mean,
Yeah.
just do it even if you're like crying while you say it. It's okay to do that. We're all human, and oftentimes that's what it looks like. Even for me, that even though I'm saying I'm good at self-advocating, it was often like through a lot of tears and just getting vulnerable in front of them, which is not easy. And
Yeah.
also getting frustrated in front of them, not your best self days, not a lot of that, but like that happens when you're stressed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's really good. And just, giving yourself permission to be able to do that, I think is a beautiful thing. So what gives you hope about how how menopause conversations are changing right now, and how you've seen sort of the breast cancer diagnosis go through? Like what gives you hope right now from when you were, when you didn't even know that this was something you'd have to go through, to you've gone through it and you've come out the other side?
Well, what gives me, I mean, a lot of it is the social media stuff has really opened up a lot of these
Yeah.
conversations from
Yeah.
my perspective. Social media, podcasts like this, people partnering with corporations like you guys are. I mean, it gives me hope knowing also how rapid things are changing.
Yeah.
So, like I talked about that thing I just saw last week with the endometriosis, I love seeing that new information is coming out this quickly and that things are changing so fast.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to double down on one thing you were talking about, is your healthcare team and how you consulted with all the folks that are, you're working with. And I want to encourage everyone to have a team. I think it's really important at any point in your healthcare journey, but I often recommend it way before menopause starts. Make sure you have your team.
Yeah.
And if someone on your team is not performing as they weren't on yours, Kristin, you can divorce your doctor. I say
Yeah.
that all the time too. Find those that really help support you and make you feel good about the decisions that you're making. That's such a great example.
Yeah, and
So
I can't believe we didn't talk about like the other part of I mean, having a therapist, and like I was doing EMDR at the time and I had a coach and a therapist. I mean, so it doesn't always have to be the conversation in the doctor's office. Oftentimes, there are so many conversations with a therapist before and and sometimes they're coaching you, or you're just getting it out and kind of almost practicing with them,
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
getting some of the tears out before you go into the office. And then being able to think it through, think it out loud. And that doesn't have to be somebody that you pay either. That could be like a mentor or a like-minded, trusted friend or somebody that's already been through this journey.
That is
Like
perfect.
the
I love it.
emotional support, I
Yeah,
think.
thank
Is
you for bringing
huge.
that up, because I was just going to ask you, is there anything else I didn't ask you that you want to make sure that our listeners know when they're coming out of our podcast today?
I think to that there are answers. I think there's something in this on this topic in particular, on the menopause. I think I already said the word unnatural and like you're going against the grain. And I believe it's worth it. I guess that's what I want to say. I want to say that it is worth it to get those answers and to get relief from these symptoms that we sometimes might feel like we are stuck with.
You don't have to suffer.
Yes.
Ah, that's
Exactly.
good. So where can people find you?
Okay, yes. So you can find me on Instagram at Kristin_Swanson_, and that's Kristin. And my website is KristinSwansonConsulting.com. I can send you that stuff. And yes, my DMs are open. I am an open book when it comes to all of this, like medical stuff. I really believe that we need to support one another through all of this. So ask me anything. And even if I don't have the answer, I might know somebody who does. And so just keep talking to people.
Thank you for your openness and your offer. I think that's huge for people to know. And the only way we're going to make this a comfortable conversation is if we talk about it, right? And it's just such a good piece. And definitely follow Kristin on Instagram, because I get inspired. I did daily today. I get inspired regularly by the work that you're doing. So I thank you for that. Okay. the last question is what we ask all of our guests. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Trust yourself. Which feels very appropriate for our conversation, but definitely in like all areas. And with everything that I do in the work that I do coaching women, a lot of it just boils down to helping them trust themselves.
Wow, that seems so simple and easy. And yet it's so hard. Well, thank you so much for making my wish come true that you come on our podcast. I love hearing your story and your experience and you sharing it and your wisdom and grace that you got through it all. And just keep on going because what you're doing is really important work. So audience, thanks for joining us today. And I hope you join us next time. And until then, find joy in the journey. Thanks, Kristin.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Medovia Menopause Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for future episodes, leave a review, and share this episode with a friend. Medovia is out to change the narrative. Learn more at medovia.com. That's MIDOVIA.com.